Hey, what is going on, Dr. Dave?
Dr. Joe, how the heck are you, sir?
I'm good, my man. I am very good. So it seems like it's been a while for me and you. We've had some things going on the last few weeks,
Yes,
so
sir.
we have not met as regularly as we like to. So I want to welcome all of our viewers and listeners to this episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, where me and Dave try and help you solve the world's problems. No, not
Not,
at all. But
not,
we
not
just
the
try.
world's, just a couple of countries or states.
So we try and help you all maybe not take the long scenic route, as you've heard us say many times before. So we've got another topic today, and this one, me and Dave have already had some discussion about this before we came online. So the topic we're going to discuss today is team building. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Dave to help us get started.
Well, thank you there, Dr. Joe. Um, Team building, yeah, this is a good topic. There's it seems to be like a constant buzzword. Oh, team building, and especially when the workplace and you're on a special projects team or just working with other individuals. It could be, let's go to a conference, let's go to a meeting, let's do a team building exercise, or we're on our team weekly meeting. We're team building. It's
Yeah.
lots of team building. So there are models out there, and I'm just going to mention one in case you're curious about what's out there, because there are a lot of tools out there, models out there about the various topics that Joe and I talk about. And one of the more common tools is the model that involves forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And we're not going to go into a lot of details, but it is a natural progression throughout the team building process that's interesting to observe. Now, that being said, most of us, when we go through team building, are not focused on going through those steps or stages and analyzing it, but just it's something to be aware of when you are in a team. When things get a little weird, sometimes there's a little friction, or you want to celebrate because you're done with the project, or someone joins the team or retires and moves on or something like that. It's just good to be familiar with some of the tools that are out there. So what Joe and I want to talk about is really more about the relationship piece pertaining to team building, because that's really at the core of a lot of those models that you're going to find out there, and many things in general in the personal and professional environment. So, yeah, relationships and team building. I'm sure by show of hands, how many of us have been on good teams? Okay, and a show of hands, how many of us have been on not so good teams? Yeah, okay, there we go. So that's about half and half of the room. Just kidding. That would be good though. um, so yeah, so relationship building. As we all know, when we first meet people, and this is going to sound similar to the model that I just mentioned, but we're not going to use those terms. When we meet people, we're generally happy to meet them, and we embrace the opportunity to do a meet and greet and get to know a little bit about the other person when they join. And maybe it's background, maybe it's hobbies and
Hmm.
interests. What strengths do they bring to the team? What areas of
Right.
opportunity do we need to focus on? Because really, you don't want everyone that's super good at project management and no one really
Right.
good at
Absolutely.
executing projects, because then you just talk about it all the time and have
Right.
lots of
Yeah.
great ideas. The other thing is when people depart a team, that's another opportunity to celebrate or to understand what strengths that they did bring to the team and what maybe opportunities are going to be left as an open opportunity for someone to fill. So, um, and then there's in the middle, that's when we actually, start actually performing and doing things well as a team. I'm not going to say mind read because that's kind of a weird thing to say, anticipate. Yeah, I can anticipate a lot of things. To me, anticipating is a little bit like assuming. So there
Yeah.
again, when we talk about relationship building, communication's a piece of that. So yeah, that's kind of my high level thoughts, Dr. Joe. What are your thoughts? I'm gonna toss the ball or the the potato back to you.
The mic.
The mic. Yeah, here, throw the mic back at you.
Well, Dave, I'm glad you started off with relationship building because if anybody's listened to this or watched these podcasts before, that's one of my number one things is all about that relationship building, and you mentioned it. That is typically what we do when we have new people join our teams. We want to find out about their background, what their interests are, what their strengths, what their weaknesses or opportunities are. And then we try and mold them into our teams. And you know, you mentioned the all the phases that you might go through, and today that's especially even like in my work environment, that's difficult because so many people change your
Mhm.
team. So, you know, if you went back to that original model that you talked about, you would always be in a constant changing you know,
Yeah.
phases, because you know, as you lose a person, now you got to bring somebody back on, and do they have the same skills, abilities, and so that's why it's important more about the relationship,
Mhm.
versus again, if we're trying to fit that peg that just left with a peg just like them. So that's the part for me that becomes more important. And if we
Sure.
think about, like Dave said it, you know, I've got a team of 5 people and we're all project managers, then who's going to do all the other stuff? So when we're thinking about teams and building those relationships, we try and complement one another. You know, you may
Yeah.
have a person that's strong in project management, or you may have a person that's strong in communication. You may have a person that enjoys doing the technological stuff. So I mean, those are the things as you become, you know, a team, and you start to build those relationships, you start to learn who has those abilities to do those things. And then one of the parts of the team building process is probably the most challenges is to have some people maybe stretch out of those things
Yeah.
that they like to do or always do or feel like they should do every time, but then they may be you know, taking opportunities away from other people that may want to learn those certain skills or things like that.
Right.
So I think that's the importance of, you know, building those relationships and finding out what people really want to do, and, you know, what types of things they want to try and learn and stretch themselves beyond just doing what they're really good at. You know, they're good at communications, but they're no good at project management. Why don't we hand them a piece of the project management, you know, just a small piece, just to
Mhm.
get them a taste of it? And it could do one or two things. It can get them to a point where they really believe, hey, this is pretty cool, I want to learn more of this. Or it could get to the point where they're like, you know what, I thought I might like it, but it's not really what I want to do. So it also helps them maybe to define some future goals and things that they want to accomplish. So again, I go back to just understanding people, their desires, you know, where they came from, where they're headed, their backgrounds, the skills, all those things. And you don't learn those things by sitting in a meeting and saying, hey,
Yeah.
I'm going to be the project manager, I'm going to be the communications person. No, it takes, they've mentioned it before, some of those, maybe those team building exercises, some of
Yeah.
those things where you sit down across from one another, and talk about real things, real life things, not
Mhm.
just, hey, where you worked before. More like, hey, what are you doing in your spare time? What do you
Yeah.
like doing? You know, how does that relate to what we do here? So really, again, getting to know people, not as a team member, but as a person first. And
Yeah.
then we can figure out how they best fit our team dynamics. And then that, you know, that really goes into the world of diversity, which is huge in effective teams.
Yeah.
Again, imagine if you got all project managers, so nobody has any diverse background that they can glean upon. But if you bring people, one person that's worked project management at another place, another person worked communications at another. So bringing all those skills that other people bring to the table, again, is going to help that team become a more effective team.
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned a couple of things that I really like. I want to touch on the diversity piece and just as well, I guess I'll touch on that now since I just fell off that train of thought again about what the I'm
Right.
trying to keep track of like five different things I want to talk about. So because it's about me, right?
Of course,
So
Dave. I
of
mean,
course it always is. So yeah, so let's go with diversity. So the diversity is partly ethnogeo. I mean, there's a lot of diverse backgrounds that people bring, you know, whether it's geographically, whether it's gender, whether it's ethnicity. socioeconomic, those are education,
Yep.
religion,
Yep.
all
All
those
those
things.
things. Yep.
The ethno-geo pieces, the demographics, those are a huge piece of diversity. But then there's the other piece, and that's diversity of thought. And that's
Right.
where we have to be careful, because when we see ethno-geo type stuff, the demographics, we have to be careful of our internal and built-in biases and prejudices. I'm not talking
Hmm.
about the negative ones. I'm just talking about the ones from how we grew up. If I grew up on the farm, I might be a little bit more partial to animals in one way or another, or not. But then we get into diversity of thought, and that's completely different. And I think that's important to talk about. We've mentioned it before, because now we're not judging a book by its cover. We're realizing that there's much more to people than the surveys that they've taken and the personality
Hmm.
indicators and that sort of thing, because those are nice little snapshots in time. But diversity of thought goes beyond that, because that's something that we have with us all the time. People are
Right.
always thinking. And when we get into teams, and I like the fact that you brought up, it's about getting to know the person, not just what they bring to the job, because there's a lot that helps you understand that diversity of thought, some of those little nuggets that people are bringing. And what I like to do with a lot of the classes that I teach and the workshops I teach is do an icebreaker, and it's not a traditional one. It's your name, where you work, that sort of thing. Yeah, I
Right.
get that.
Right.
But then I like to end it with, also tell us something interesting or fun about you, because that's going to tell you a
Right.
lot about that person.
Yep.
Maybe they like ice cream, maybe they're a foodie, maybe they like working on cars or painting or
Right.
tiling or jogging or riding their bikes or theater or comic-con. There's all kinds of things that bring people together. And when you start, well, this is circling back the long scenic route, I guess, back to relationship building. That's what relationship building is about. It's understanding what those commonalities are that connect us
Right.
to each other. And once we've
Yep.
established that, no matter how difficult the task, how challenging the task, our perception on our strengths and areas of opportunities, those nuggets that we've connected with people are not only going to help us get through it, but to your point, hey, Dave's been doing this job for quite a bit on the team. Let's expand his knowledge here and bring someone else here. So we're actually giving two people an opportunity to learn a new
Right.
skill set
Yep.
versus just keeping them in that bucket or in that one area. So
Right.
I like that we talk about those things. And the abilities is another piece. Don't just keep one person doing the same job or the same
Right.
task
Yep.
because that's what they do.
Right. They're
Maybe
good at it.
they're good at it, but
Yeah.
maybe that's not what they want to do. I've talked to people that, they've done their career for many, many years. It could be in the military, it could be on the civilian side of things. And when they're done and they move on or retire or, choose a different profession, they're done with it. It's like, but you were
Right.
so good
Yep.
at it. That's such a cool job. Been there,
Right.
done that. I'm done. So we have to respect that and be aware of that. Just because we are on a team or in a team building exercise, labeling someone as a project manager or team leader or communications or PR or tech person, we've just, as I mentioned, just labeled them as opposed to discussing with the team, what are your strengths? What are your areas of opportunity? What would you like to do this time? Because it's important to understand what they're good at, but what they would like to do.
Dave, that's a good point because again, we all have our own biases, but like you say, a lot of times we look at if we don't find those commonalities between each other, like you just mentioned, getting to know them, a lot of times we just view them for the surface.
Yeah.
And so you mentioned it. So like me, and you come from the military, people already have a bias against us.
Mhm.
I'll admit it. I had bias, working in the manufacturing environment, I had bias against engineers because they, have a different way of
Yeah.
looking at things. And so I viewed it as they think they're better, they're eggheads, they can't deal with people, those types of things. So all of us have those types of things. And so when people come to a meeting or to a new team environment, that's what we assimilate to them. Like you
Mhm.
said, we say, hey, that's the tech person or that's the communications person because that's the labels that we put on them because of what they've done or do,
Right.
on a day-to-day basis. But until we get to know, behind the scenes, that person individually, again, going back to that relationship building, that's what we're going to assimilate them to until we
Mhm.
know different. So that's why it's very important as people come into your teams, or into that environment, that you get to know them, above the surface, below the surface. I mean,
Mhm.
not just what you see on the outside, but those inner, um, that diversity of thought, that's what continues to expand that, because you learn more about them, that they did this, they did that, but that's not something that you would have readily know. I like
Mhm.
the idea of you talking about, tell us something of, we don't know about you, or something of interest, which I also like that question too, because I've got some of those that people will be like, wow, I didn't know that. So
Mhm.
I like that too, and it does form that. Oh, okay, so man, I like that too, and then that's some of those immediate, connections that you can go back and start to build upon those things, and then realize there's a lot more things that you have in common than you would have ever thought. So I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing, is being able to take down that shield that we all have, or that bias shield, and even looking through those bias glasses or goggles that we look through every day, just because of what area somebody works in, what they look like, what environment you think they've grown up in, what you
Yeah.
think
How
you
they
know about
dress, how
them.
they
Yeah,
appear, all that stuff.
yeah, it just really, it could be very limiting, if you use that approach. I'll tell you a perfect example.
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with teens, but just to, like you said, the appearance, the clothes you wear, things like that. So I'm at a dealership, and I may have mentioned this before on one of our podcasts, maybe just me and you, but I'm at a dealership, and I'm wearing just, I just like wearing casual clothes. So I'm like, today I'm wearing, just a little 3-button shirt and some shorts. That's really how I like to, dress and go outside. So I'm at a car lot, and I'm walking the lot 15, 20 minutes, looking at a lot of cars. Nobody came out. And then, so, I'm ready to leave. So I go to my car, and it's a convertible, it's an Audi. It's got personalized plates on it. And so now the salesman's very interested. Oh, is that your car? I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, it is. He said, hey, can I help you find? I was like, no, I'm fine. I already looked at what I wanted to look at. He's like, hey, you're a doctor? Because I have that, personalized plates, a doctor on there. And he's like, I said, yeah. He said, oh, wow. Hey, this is a great car. He's really now getting into the conversation, because,
Mhm.
again, as I was walking around the parking lot, nobody paid me any attention. It wasn't until, again, going back to the appearance
Mhm.
piece, you just said what you're wearing. Now what I'm driving is of interest to him. So, that's, again, that bias, that he might have missed out on a sale
Yeah.
because he chose to just not be human and come up and say, hey, how's it going? But
Yeah.
rather, try and make a fast sell at the end when it's too late.
Yeah.
So that's, again, off track a little bit, but, not
No, I think that's a
necessarily.
great example because it really does get into the inherent biases and prejudices that we have. And it may have been inadvertent or it may have been somewhat deliberate. And I would wager towards the end it was probably a little bit more deliberate because he saw the
Right,
nice car with the nice plates and something specific on there that caught his attention. And then the dollar signs might have appeared
right.
like, oh, this person can afford the Lamborghinis and Ferraris he was looking at.
It was not that dealership, by no means. No.
So yeah, I wanted to pull in the piece about some of the models or some of the different modeling tools that are out there without getting specifics and without talking about the
Right.
previous one. But we've all heard about these communication tools or personality type indicators, and
Mhm.
I'm not. I'll be honest. I understand them, and I understand, and they do have their purposes. But some of
Right,
those tools have been our personality indicators that they're actually misusing as a communication indicator or vice
right,
versa. And maybe there's 3 or 4 different types of results versus the broad, diverse results that are in reality. There's more than just a strategic, creative, verbal, and nonverbal person. I'm just
right,
making that
right.
up.
No, I
It
I
goes
agree.
much
Yeah.
deeper than that. So I want to caution our listeners and viewers about those tools that just because you've taken one of those indicator types or type indicators doesn't mean that Joe is a this or Dave is a that, because then again, there again, or putting those labels and assign. That may be a preference for me most of the time, or some of the time, or just that day. And that particular survey or tool may have been positively or negatively impacted by how I'm feeling for that day.
Right.
I
Yep.
guarantee you, if I win the Mega Millions multi-billion-dollar lottery, I'm going to be a lot happier to fill that thing out and say, "Oh yeah, I'm doing great. Oh
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I'd want to work all the time." Yeah.
Right.
Versus if I just got fired and my car broke down and my kids are sick and I have to figure out a way to pick them up from school,
Yep.
I'm going to be in a lot different place and headspace. So it's important to keep those things in mind, that those surveys are just snapshots in time for that moment. And granted, they're going to be level throughout most of the time. If you take it year over year, or every 6 months, which I guess if that's your definition of fun, it'll be pretty stable. But you'll notice that if you do any sort of longitudinal view, you're going to notice that's going to go up and down throughout time. And sometimes you can make those changes deliberate, like if you want to expand your knowledge or your personal toolbox, or your professional toolbox. And I want to talk about, again, getting to know people. When I worked for the state early in my career, I was a supervisor, and I had 2 employees that worked for me. And talk about oil and water. Those 2 people just did not mix whatsoever. I mean, there was no playing nice, or there was just no play at all.
Right.
I mean, and previous supervisors refused to schedule them together because of that, because they were just button heads. I mean, I had heard stories that they were arguing so loud you could hear them at the other end of the 100-yard hallway.
Wow.
And I made it a point to get them to work together because it was impacting my ability to effectively schedule, because they're both really, really, really good at their jobs. And so what I did is I got to know each one of them individually, not while they're working together, individually. And again, finding that common ground. Hey, what do you like to do? And this, that, on a personal level. And I found out that, ironically or serendipitously, however you want to look at it, that they both liked working on cars. And so after I found that out, I told them, I'm going to schedule the 2 of you together. And they were not pleased about that.
Right.
And then when I did, when I followed through with that commitment, they were less pleased. And I was there with them when when they were signed to work together. I was there to make sure that there wasn't going to be any negative impact or confrontation. And I reintroduced them to each other. And I said, I'd like for you to treat this as the first time you're meeting each other. And oh, by the way, so-and-so and so-and-so, you may not know this, but you both like to work on cars. I'm going to leave you with that, and let's just have a good day.
Right.
And by the end of the day, I actually had to go down to their location and remind them it was time to leave work, because they're all, they did their job really well, but they're just like, they were just like all about cars. And from that point on, not only was I able to schedule them on a regular basis, they actually requested to work together, which then became a difficult challenge because I needed 2 experts to be able to work together sometimes, not all of the time. So it actually wound up being better than what I had hoped for. So when we talk about team building and relationship building and stereotyping and biases, that's where relationship building is key, and communicating with each other, because here are 2 people that didn't work with each other for years, that all of a sudden, they weren't necessarily besties on the outside, but they sure did enjoy working together because they were good at and they were very efficient at what they did. So,
No,
that was my point.
I think that's a great point. The idea that you were able to learn that about both of the parties, and that's really, again, comes down to getting that personal information that you're only going to get that through building a relationship, which is, again, one of the most important things you can do as a leader, as a teammate, if you want to progress in that development of that team or yourself, that you get to know people at the individual level, and then you find out what motivates them, what discourages them,
What brings them
what
joy? Yeah,
exactly. You start to learn those things. And in your case, the example you just provided, you found two people that had the same love of a certain thing that helped mold that, relationship at
mhm,
work. And so that's really what it's about, is again, um, taking away those just already biased ideas about where people come from, and the other part of it is not wanting to think that they can change or be different, or
yeah,
that you can see it in a different light. And I think that's one of the important things, is that we allow ourselves to
yeah,
accept that things can be different, that they don't
yeah,
have to be the same as what they were. So I think this was a very good topic. And I know we talked about team building, but it really still just starts with that, building those relationships. Because even if you're looking at building a team, you're the leader, and you get to choose 5 or 6 people. You're going to probably go out and find it, especially if you already started building relationships with people. You're going to go out and find those people that hit those key markers that you
mhm,
need. And the only way you're going to know that is because their title might say project manager, but you find out that they're an IT guru. I mean,
mhm.
so it just, again, without knowing that person individual, not knowing that they had that ability to do those other things.
Yeah. And in the last couple of minutes, I'm gonna say my last couple of words, and then
Okay.
I'll throw it back over to you. But another piece just to keep in mind is it's about fit. It's about having a good fit on a personal level and on what you bring to the team level, because that's when those teams not only become a team and work well, but they do exceptionally well. And I'm not saying they have to be besties again. I'm not saying they're besties outside and they play softball or go bowling or go to the park and hike together.
Right.
What
Right.
I am saying is that a very good team will be able to communicate effectively about work and about personal interest while they're on
Right.
the team, because that creates that synergy to not just have an end result or a good end result, but an exceptional end result. So with
Right.
that, I'll toss it over to you.
All right. Well, Dave, thanks for getting us started on this topic. And as we mentioned, team building, there are models out there that you can follow, and typically you do follow. You just don't know you're following those
That's right.
models. But thanks for introducing that. And then again, the personal side, or the relationship side, is also a critical piece of that. Even just to Dave's points where he just mentioned getting to know those individuals personally. So again, you can see when something's causing them to stress out, something that may be
Yeah.
overwhelming them. And if you don't know, and somebody made this comment just the other, probably a month or so ago, that I heard this, I'd never heard this before. But a doctor asked a group of people, he said, "Hey, do you know your team?" And everybody was like, "Yeah, we know our team." And the question was, "Do you know who's riding in the car with them when they're going to an event?" It could be anything.
Yeah.
And then most people took a pause and thought, "You know what? I don't," which means they don't know anything about their family, their friends or things like that. So I thought that was very
Yeah.
powerful to ask that question. Do you know who's riding with someone to an event? So I thought that was a pretty easy way to say, find out about your teammates. So I'll end it with that. Like I say, we've beat this up a little bit, but again, it's the team building piece still starts with that, building those relationships. So we want to thank you for tuning into this episode. As always, we really appreciate you listening and viewing these episodes. And again, if there's anything you'd like to hear from us, don't hesitate to leave comments, and like this video if you're watching YouTube. Again, to help us gain more viewerships. And we do appreciate you, every one of you. So with that, we want to thank you for tuning in, and continue being your not so ordinary you.